Hey guys, Julian Lello here and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new to my channel or subscribed since my last video, thank you, and I really do appreciate all the support that everybody showed on that last video. If you haven't checked it out yet, I basically shot a portrait challenge with a friend of mine, Liam, who some of you may know on Instagram and YouTube as Seventh Era. And what we did was we both shot the same model. We set a 3-minute timer, shot across a number of locations, and then I compared our images in terms of photography style and editing style at the end of the video. So this video here loosely follows on from that one, as a few of you have asked me how I edited my images in that video. And to be honest with you, they are really basic edits. One of the things I look for, probably because I have that little bit of a fashion photography background, is just to maintain a really good skin tone and garment color that's true to life. And what I'm going to do is we'll pick one of those images from the shoot and I'll run through the basic editing technique that I used with you, and then at the end how I use the brush tool just to kind of level up that basic edit. So let's jump straight into it. So the image that I'm going to be working with today is this one here of our model Liz, and how I generally like to start is by sliding down to remove chromatic aberration and enable profile correction and ticking both of those off. I then come up to this top and basically work my way down through Lightroom. So here we've got the crop. I'm going to go with that 4:5 ratio, lining it up so that the corner of this car park is nice and straight in the image, and that Liz's face is in the center of these two lines. So that's pretty good there. Now I'm just going to work my way down, starting with the white balance. So here I'm going to lift up the warmth a little bit. Let's check. I think that's pretty good. When you move a slider but you want it to go back to as shot, all you need to do is double click on it and it'll go back to where it was. I'm going to lift up the exposure just a fraction, and I'm going to add a little bit of contrast in, which is what I like to do with most of my portraits or fashion images. Highlights here. I'm going to decrease the highlights just to bring some detail back into the whole image, and I'm going to lift up the shadows so that I get some nice detail back in to Liz. Whites I'm going to lift up just slightly, and then blacks I often like to bring down the blacks a little bit to add a little bit of depth and dimension and contrast to a portrait or fashion image. With these 3 sliders here, I generally don't play with texture, but I do like to add a little bit of contrast and sometimes a little bit of dehaze, especially when the image is backlit. As I mentioned, I don't generally play too much with the colors of an image because I like to keep skin tones and also garment color true to life. So saturation, I don't play with too much, but I do sometimes add just a little bit of vibrance into an image. Now coming down to the tone curve, I like to start in the middle of the tone curve. What I do is I like to lift up the midtones, which you can see is starting to put some nice detail back into the image. So if I turn off the tone curve just here, you can see that's the before and that's the after. So you can see it's really put a lot of detail back into the image and back into those shadows. I'll then, again, to play with some contrast, I sometimes bring the shadows down or the blacks down a little bit, but here I won't be doing that. So far what we've got is before and after. And you can already see that it's warmed up, it's got a lot more detail in it and a lot more light into it. Moving down, I come down to sharpening. Now, by holding Option and sliding across masking, you can choose the details of the image that you want sharpened. So that looks pretty good there. And now I'll slide up sharpening to where I want it. I don't just go and slide the sharpening across without doing that masking first, because it can often add a lot of grain into an image. Moving down to vignette. Just drop the vignetting a little bit, not enough so that you can see it in the image, just enough to give a subtle point of focus of the image. I don't like to be able to see that black ring in my images. And that's pretty much it. That's how I do my basic edit. So we've got before and after. As I mentioned, super simple, but it does add a lot of dimension and detail back into the image. What I'm going to do now is work with the brush a little bit. so that we can just take this nice basic edit to kind of another level. So to start with, I'll choose a brush here, and the first thing I want to do is check the feathering on the brush. I like the feathering up somewhere around, sort of around 70, so you can see the 2 rings there on the brush, and that just means there's not a hard edge around your brush or what you're working on. And the first thing I'm going to do is just give 1 tap to Liz's face, and I'm going to lift up the exposure just a little bit, and even the shadows. So if I take that away, you can see there what that's doing. I think that's probably a little bit too much. I'm just going to drop the blacks a little bit, add a bit more contrast into it. Okay, now hit enter to activate that brush, and now I'm going to select Dodge, which will lighten areas of the image. Now, what I generally like to brush when I'm lightening is the areas of the image that are already got highlights in them. So anywhere you can see that's got a nice highlight, the cheeks, the top of the forehead here. The nose already has quite a strong highlight to it, so I won't brush over that because it might blow it out a little bit too much. But then we can also go in, brush the neck a little bit, and zoom out, and even you can do a little bit on the arm there. Now, it's quite strong, the Dodge brush. It's at 0.25 on the exposure slider. What I want to do is bring it back a little bit. I want it to be quite a subtle difference, and that looks pretty good there. Hit enter, and then we're going to select another brush tool, which will be Burn. Now this darkens areas. What I like to do here is just go around the hairline a little bit. And then any other sort of shadows that we see. So we can go around there. Now it looks quite harsh at the moment, but I am going to, we can come down to the arm, do a brush. And now this works by dropping the exposure. I'm going to get that slider and slide it back up a little bit, so again it becomes quite subtle. And there's your before and after. I am going to use one more brush, and this is just to make the overall image a little bit more dynamic, and I'm going to make it quite big, and I'm just going to tap in the corner here. I'm going to lift up the exposure and the warmth, and you can see it just makes it just accentuates that golden light, that sun that's coming in through the back of the image, and just to make the image a little bit more dynamic. Hit enter to activate those. Just going to grab the clone tool, zoom in quickly. Liz has got really great skin, but if you wanted to, just as an example, to clean something up, you could just tap there with the clone tool. The clone tool will then select another area that is close to the skin tone and color that will take away any blemish or anything that you want to get rid of. The only other thing I'd get rid of is probably this leaf down here on the road. It's just distracting me for some reason. And there we go, that's pretty good. I think it's just a little bit warm now that we've made all the adjustments. I'm just going to drop this slider back a little bit, before and after. So that's it. You can see that the changes that I made were really minor and basic changes just to get the overall image nice and balanced. And it was the brush tool and the little clone stamp that just take them to a next level. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a like, a subscribe, and as always, thank you for pressing play.